I will never forget this day that changed my life forever. It was a morning like any other. I woke up next to my husband Paolo, kissed him, and went to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. While waiting for the coffee to be ready, I remembered that my mother had sent me a recipe by email. I searched for my mobile phone all over the house but couldn't find it. Then I saw Paolo's phone on the dining room table. I thought I would quickly check my email from his device, thinking everything would be fine. I never imagined what I was about to discover. When I opened his inbox, one email caught my attention. The subject was Paris update, and the sender was Felipe, one of Paolo's best friends. My heart raced, and my stomach knotted. With trembling hands, I opened the message. What I saw left me cold. It was a detailed account of Paolo's conquests, with the names of women, dates, and places. I felt my world crumble. I couldn't believe that the man I had shared the last 5 years of my life with whom I had built so many dreams and plans, had betrayed me like this. Tears started to flow from my eyes as I read. Each line was a stab in my heart. I realized that our entire marriage had been a sham, a carefully crafted lie so that Paolo could nourish his ego and compete with his friends. I felt humiliated, deceived, and completely broken. How could he do this to me? How could he play with my feelings like that? At that moment, I heard the bedroom door open. Paolo entered the kitchen with his usual carefree smile. He looked at me and noticed my tears. "What's wrong, my dear?" he asked, approaching me. I couldn't speak. I just showed him his phone with his inbox open. His face fell when he realized what I had discovered. He tried to explain, to tell me it was just a stupid game, that it didn't mean anything, but I couldn't believe him anymore. I had seen the truth with my own eyes. That day, my perfect couple life shattered. I had to face the painful reality that the man I loved had betrayed me in the worst possible way. I knew that nothing would ever be the same again, that I would have to make difficult choices, but at that moment, all I could do was cry, scream, and try to understand how I could have been so blind, how I could have missed the signs. The hidden truth had come to light, and I now had to face the consequences. After discovering the heartbreaking truth in Paolo's email, I felt my world collapse. I couldn't believe that the man with whom I had shared so many happy moments, dreams, and plans had betrayed me like this. I felt deceived, humiliated, and completely devastated. How could he do this to me? How could he play with my feelings like that? That evening, I waited for Paolo to come home. Every minute felt like an eternity as my mind raced, trying to find an explanation, a reason for his behavior. When I finally heard the key in the lock, my heart raced. Paolo entered the room with his usual carefree smile as if nothing had happened. Seeing him so unaware of the pain he had caused only fueled the anger rising within me. I approached him, phone in hand, to show him the email I had discovered. His face fell, and his smile faded. He tried to explain, telling me it was just a stupid game among friends, that it meant nothing, but I couldn't believe him anymore. Every word he said sounded like a hollow excuse, another lie to add to the list. I yelled at him, accusing him of his disrespect, of playing with my feelings as if they were a toy. I asked him how he could look me in the eyes and tell me he loved me while sleeping with other women behind my back. He tried to defend himself, saying it never went that far, that it was just harmless flirting, but to me, each name on that list was a betrayal, a stab in our love. I cried, screamed, and threw everything I had at him. He tried to get closer to me, to comfort me, but I couldn't stand his touch. I felt dirty, used, as if our marriage had been a lie. That evening, through tears and accusations, I told him to leave, that I didn't want to see him anymore. He tried to resist, to convince me that we could get through this, but I was determined. I couldn't stay another minute under the same roof as the man who had shattered my trust. When Paolo finally left, I collapsed on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. I felt lost, alone, and betrayed. I didn't know how I was going to overcome this pain, how I was going to rebuild my life after this devastating revelation. But amidst my anguish, one thing was clear: I couldn't remain silent. The world needed to know the truth about Paolo, about the man hiding behind the facade of a perfect husband, and I would make sure of it. After the confrontation with Paolo, I stayed awake all night, crying until I couldn't anymore. The pain and betrayal consumed me, and I kept thinking about all the times he had looked me in the eyes and said he loved me while sleeping with other women behind my back. I felt deceived, used, and completely broken. The next morning, with swollen eyes and a broken heart, I made a decision. I couldn't keep silent. I couldn't let Paolo continue his life as if nothing had happened. The world needed to know the truth about the man I had married, the man who had played with my feelings like a toy. I organized a meeting with our closest friends and family at a local restaurant. As I prepared to leave, my hands trembled, and my stomach twisted with nerves. I knew that what I was about to do would change my life forever, but I couldn't bear the thought of Paolo getting away with it. When I arrived at the restaurant, everyone was there, waiting for me with worried faces. Paolo was there too, with a look of confusion and fear on his face. I approached the table, trying to stay calm, and asked everyone to listen to me. In a trembling voice, I told them about the email I had discovered, about the bet and Paolo's conquests. I showed them screenshots as proof while tears streamed down my cheeks. Our friends and family looked at me with shock and sympathy, and I could see the disgust on their faces when they looked at Paolo. He tried to defend himself, to downplay his actions, but no one believed him. His reputation crumbled before my eyes, and I saw his world collapse around him. At that moment, I felt a certain satisfaction seeing his facade fall apart, but the emptiness in my heart remained. After the public confrontation, I apologized and left the restaurant, unable to bear another minute in Paolo's presence. I walked aimlessly through the streets, feeling a mix of relief and pain. I knew I had done the right thing by exposing his lies, but the weight of the betrayal still crushed me. When I got home, I collapsed on the couch, emotionally and physically exhausted. Staring at the ceiling, I realized that this was only the beginning of a long and difficult path to healing. I had to relearn to trust, to rebuild my life without Paolo, but at that moment, all I could do was curl up and cry, letting the pain tear me apart from the inside. The public humiliation had been a necessary step, but I knew that true healing would come from within and that I would have to fight for it every day. After the public confrontation, I plunged into a period of deep sadness and self-pity. I spent my days curled up in bed, crying until I fell asleep, only to wake up and start again. I felt lost, betrayed, and completely alone. I couldn't understand how Paolo, the man with whom I had built my life, could betray me like this. I constantly wondered what I had done wrong, why I hadn't been enough for him, why despite all the love, trust, and dedication I had given him, he had sought solace elsewhere. These thoughts tormented me day and night, and gradually, I felt like I was losing my identity, drowning in a sea of self-doubt and self-disgust. It was in this moment of darkness that my best friend Laura intervened. One day, without warning, she showed up at my door with a determined look. She forced me to get out of bed, take a shower, and go get something to eat. While I protested and tried to retreat into my cocoon of misery, she looked at me with firmness and compassion. "Julia, listen to me," she said, taking my hands in hers. "I know you're hurting, and you have the right to feel that way, but you can't let Paolo's betrayal define who you are. You're not to blame for his actions. You did nothing to deserve this. You deserve to be loved, respected, and appreciated for who you are." These words were like a ray of light in my darkness. For the first time since I discovered the truth, I felt a glimmer of hope. Laura hugged me while I cried, but this time my tears were different. They were tears of relief, of gratitude to someone who loved and supported me unconditionally. With Laura's support and that of my family, I began to take small steps toward healing. I started therapy, a safe place where I could express my fears, insecurities, and pain. My therapist helped me understand that Paolo's betrayal did not reflect my worth as a person and that I had the power to rebuild my life on my own terms. Little by little, I began to rediscover who I was. Without Paolo, I resumed my hobbies, went out with friends, and allowed myself to enjoy small moments of happiness. Each day was a challenge, and some were more difficult than others, but with each step I took, I felt like I was regaining a bit of my strength and identity. The path to healing was not easy, and I knew I still had a long way to go, but with the love and support of my loved ones and a new understanding of my own resilience, I knew I could overcome any obstacle. Paolo's betrayal had broken me, but it had also given me the opportunity to rebuild myself, to find a new strength within me, and for that, despite the pain, I was grateful. Over the weeks and months, I felt myself slowly emerging from the depths of my pain. With each therapy session, each conversation with friends, and each moment of introspection, I felt the broken pieces of my heart begin to heal, to come together to form a new version of myself. I decided not to let Paolo's betrayal define my life. He had made his choices, and now I was going to make mine. I started to focus on my own development and happiness instead of living in the shadow of his deceit. I enrolled in painting classes, something I had always wanted to do but never dared. Each brushstroke was a way to express my emotions, to channel my pain and hope into something beautiful and meaningful. Through my classes, I met new people who accepted and appreciated me for who I was, not for my relationship with Paolo. I made friends who supported me in my healing journey, who made me laugh and reminded me that life was still full of possibilities. Slowly, I began to regain confidence in myself and respect myself. I also committed to taking care of myself in a way I had neglected during my marriage. I started exercising regularly, eating healthier, and prioritizing my emotional well-being. Each small choice was an act of self-love, a way to show myself that I was important and that I deserved to be taken care of. By immersing myself in these new hobbies and relationships, I discovered a sense of freedom and excitement that I hadn't felt in years. I was no longer bound by Paolo's expectations or the need to please him. I could be myself without excuses or fear. I began to appreciate my own company, to see moments of solitude as opportunities for reflection and growth. There were moments when I still felt the weight of the betrayal, when sadness and anger resurfaced, but I now had the tools and support to manage these emotions healthily. I learned to allow myself to feel, to acknowledge my emotions without letting them control me, and with each wave of grief overcome, I felt stronger, more resilient. The new Julia that emerged was a woman who knew her own worth, who marveled at her ability to heal and grow. I no longer defined my identity by my relationship with Paolo but by my own essence, my passions, and my values. I had learned that true love begins with self-love and that no betrayal could take that away from me. Reflecting on my journey, I realized that while Paolo's betrayal had been incredibly painful, it had also given me an unexpected gift. It had forced me to confront my insecurities, to ask myself who I was and who I wanted to be. This process allowed me to discover a strength and clarity I hadn't known before. Today, looking to the future, I felt a mix of excitement and peace. I knew there would still be challenges and difficult moments, but I also knew I had the ability to face them with grace and resilience. The new Julia was a woman who embraced uncertainty, who opened herself to the possibilities of life with a brave and hopeful heart. Continuing to paint, laugh with my friends, and develop my self-love, I felt like I was finally living an authentic life, a life that truly belonged to me. Paolo's betrayal had been the catalyst for a profound awakening, and for that, despite all the pain, I was grateful because through this experience, I had found the new Julia, and it was someone I was proud to know and love. A few months after the revelation of Paolo's betrayal, my life had taken on a new rhythm. I felt stronger, more confident, and more at peace with my past. I had learned to appreciate my own company and find joy in the little things in life. Yet, despite all this growth, a part of me still wondered what would happen if I met Paolo again. That moment came unexpectedly one Saturday afternoon. I was sitting in my favorite cafe, enjoying a cappuccino and a good book when I felt a familiar presence. I looked up, and there he was, standing next to my table with an uncertain expression on his face. For a moment, I froze, not knowing how to react. Part of me wanted to run away, to avoid any contact with the man who had hurt me so deeply, but another part, the one that had worked so hard to heal, was curious to know what he had to say. "Hello, Julia," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Can I sit down?" I nodded, indicating the chair in front of me. As he sat down, I noticed that he had changed. He looked tired, as if he had aged several years in a few months. His eyes, once sparkling with mischief and charm, now reflected a deep sadness. "I know you probably don't want to see me," he began, "and I don't blame you. What I did to you is unforgivable. I've spent every day since then regretting my actions, hating myself for hurting you like that. I felt a lump in my throat but remained silent, letting him continue. I've been seeing a therapist to try and understand why I did what I did, and I realized that I was afraid. Afraid of the depth of my feelings for you, afraid of not being enough. So, I hid behind this facade, this stupid bet, instead of facing my own demons. He took my hand, and I didn't pull away. Julia, I know it's too late for us, but I want you to know that I loved you. I love you more than I ever thought it was possible to love someone, and I regret with all my being hurting you like I did. Tears welled up in my eyes, and I saw that his were wet too. At that moment, I felt a mix of emotions, pain, anger, compassion, and even a trace of love, but mostly, I felt a sense of closure, of finality. Thank you for saying that, Paolo, I replied, squeezing his hand before letting go. I appreciate your honesty and your apology, and I forgive you, not because you deserve it, but because I deserve the peace that comes with letting go of the past. I stood up, and so did he. I wish you the best, Paolo. I hope you find the healing and happiness you seek, but that journey is yours, and mine is separate from yours. With one last smile of farewell, I left the cafe, feeling a weight lifted from my shoulders. The encounter with Paolo had been unexpected but necessary. It had allowed me to say what I needed to say, to forgive, not for him, but for myself, and with each step I took away from him, I felt I was also taking a step towards my future, a bright future full of possibilities. I thought I had left behind the past and all the pain that Paolo's betrayal had caused. I had focused on my healing, on rebuilding my life on my own terms. However, fate had one last surprise in store for me, one that would test my resolve and force me to face the truth once more. It all started with an unexpected message from Felipe, Paolo's friend who had mentioned the bet in that fateful email. Julia, I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but there's something you should know. Can we meet? Intrigued and a little fearful, I agreed to meet him in a park near my home. As I waited on a bench, thoughts raced through my mind. What could Felipe possibly want to tell me after all this time? Were there other secrets, other betrayals I didn't know about yet? When he arrived, I could see the regret and shame on his face. Without preamble, he began to speak, the words pouring out of him like a torrent. Julia, it's me. It's me who initiated the bet. It's me who pushed Paolo to participate even though he didn't want to. My heart raced, and I felt a mix of shock and confusion. Felipe continued, his voice trembling. Paolo loved you. He really loved you. He told me several times that you were the best thing that ever happened to him. He wanted to give up the bet, the games, to be the man you deserved. I felt tears burning my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. Felipe looked at me with a pleading expression. But in my stupidity and arrogance, I convinced him to continue. I told him not to be a coward, that he had to prove himself. I fed his insecurities, his need for validation, and in doing so, I destroyed what was most beautiful in him. I remained silent for a long time, trying to process this new information. Part of me clung to it like a lifeline, proof that Paolo's love had been real after all, but another part, the one that had fought so hard to heal, knew that it didn't change the fact that he had made his choices, that he had deeply hurt me. Finally, I spoke in a surprisingly steady voice. Thank you for telling me this, Felipe. I know it couldn't have been easy for you, but in the end, Paolo made his own choices. He chose to participate in the bet. He chose to deceive me despite his love for me, and those choices have consequences. Felipe nodded, accepting. The truth of my words. I know, Julia, and I'm not here to excuse what we did. I'm here because you needed to know the whole truth, and because I needed to ask your forgiveness for the role I played in all of this. I can never express how sorry I am. We parted shortly after, and as I walked home, I felt a strange sense of calm. Knowing the truth, though painful, was also liberating. It allowed me to see the complexity of the situation, the shadows and light in each of us, and it reinforced my determination to move forward, not letting the past dictate my future. The truth, in all its rawness and beauty, had set me free, and with that freedom, I knew I could face whatever life had in store. After my meeting with Felipe and the revelation of the truth behind Paolo's actions, I found myself at an emotional crossroads. Part of me wanted to run to Paolo, to forgive him and try to rebuild what we had. After all, I now knew that his love for me had been real, that he had wanted to be a better man for me. But as I reflected on this new information, another realization dawned on me. Yes, Paolo had loved me, but despite that, he had let his own insecurities and the pressure from his friends cloud his judgment. He had made decisions that had deeply hurt me, that had destroyed the trust and respect fundamental to any relationship. And I had changed. Through the pain and introspection, I had grown. I had learned to love and value myself in a way I never had before. I had built a life I was proud of, surrounded by people who supported and encouraged me. Was I willing to risk all that, to return to a love that, although real, had also deeply hurt me? I spent days pondering these questions, examining my feelings from every possible angle. Finally, with a clarity both painful and liberating, I made my decision. I called Paolo and asked him to meet me. When he arrived, I saw hope and fear mingling on his face. I took his hands in mine and looked into his eyes, the eyes I had once loved so much. "Paolo," I began, my voice soft but firm, "I know what Felipe told me. I know you loved me, that you wanted to be better for me, and I want you to know that part of me will always love you." He started to speak, but I raised my hand, asking him to let me continue. "But I also know that love, true love, requires trust, respect, and companionship, and those are things that your actions have broken." Tears welled up in his eyes, and I felt mine slide down my cheeks. "I have worked so hard to rebuild myself, to create a life that fills me with joy and purpose, and I realized that even if I forgive you, I can't go back to what we were. I can't risk my peace of mind and self-esteem." I hugged him, a gesture of farewell and liberation. "I wish you all the happiness in the world, Paolo. I hope you find someone who will love you as you deserve to be loved, but that someone cannot be me, not anymore." We parted, and as I watched him walk away, I felt a mix of sadness and peace. I knew I had made the right choice for myself, even though it was difficult. I had chosen to love myself, to honor my own journey and growth. Looking to the future, I knew there would be more love, more laughter, more challenges, and triumphs, and I would face them all head-on with the strength and wisdom I had gained from this experience. Paolo's betrayal had been a chapter in my story, a chapter that had shaped me in unimaginable ways, but it was not the end of my story. It was simply a step in my journey, a journey I now knew I could walk with grace, resilience, and unwavering self-love.